Man. Okay. Good evening, guys. It's your boy Atypical Security Guard finishing up here tonight. About to head home. I wanted to talk about the Sonya Massey shooting that happened in Illinois. This is a very hot button topic. A lot of people talking about it across the spectrum. I believe President Joe Biden made a statement. I think that Vice President Harris made a statement. There's been a lot of breakdown of the body camera footage that came out. I believe it was released yesterday. So for those who are unaware, here's a quick rundown of the situation. So apparently, Sonya Massey contacts the police department, says that, and this is my best recollection of the situation, that she either hears or thinks that someone is in her backyard. They dispatch 2 officers. The officers check the perimeter of the home. They don't see anything, don't see any sign of break-in, any sort of disturbance. And then they go to the front door, knock on the front door a couple of times. There's no answer from the occupant inside. On the third time, a little bit louder knock. Some would say they were actually beating on the door. Sonya comes to the door. That the first thing that she says, they ask her, like, why didn't you answer the door? And she says she's putting some clothes on. And then I think the next statement that she makes is, don't hurt me. So right there, it's kind of an odd, awkward conversation because, the police are being cordial. They're seemingly being nice to her. And she says this, and throughout the conversation that they have, this quick little exchange, to me, it's pretty instantly recognizable that she has some sort of mental situation going on. For whatever reason, the police ask her questions about a car that's in her driveway. Almost, in my opinion, it seems like they're fishing for some reason to ID her. And I don't know why that would be necessary because she was the one that had contacted the law enforcement officers in the first place. There, to the best of my knowledge, seems to be some sort of situation where she contacts the police department again, or maybe even calls 911 once these officers are inside of her apartment. Dispatch is telling her, hey, if the cops are there, there's no need for us to be on the phone. You can talk to them. There's this back and forth of them trying to get her identification, get her name, some things like that, some information about who she is. And at one point in time, the officer that's involved in the shooting basically says, this would all be a lot easier if you would just give me your ID. So there's some back and forth about whether or not she has her ID, where the ID is. She's saying some really weird stuff about some paperwork that she has. It's a cordial conversation back and forth between the 2 officers and Sonya, but at the same time, I'm looking at the entirety of the situation and not really understanding why they're inside the apartment to begin with. So just keep that in mind. Then the officer that's involved in the shooting notices that there's a boiling pot of water on the stove. And he says something to the effect, that we don't want there to be a fire. Why don't you go take that off the stove? And so she moves over towards the kitchen, and this is kind of like an open floor plan, either, duplex or apartment. So the living room is separated by a counter that faces outward. So now she's on the other side of the counter. She grabbed the hot water off the stove, and there's a little bit of banter back and forth between the officer and Sonya. And the officer says something to the effect of, or she says something to the effect of, where are you going? And he kind of jokes like, oh, I'm backing up because I don't want you to, throw that water at me. And then she says something to the effect of, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And he says, what? And she says, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And guys, the instant reaction that this officer has to her saying that phrase, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. I know that the hyperbole of law enforcement officers being possessed or being demons, that is something that is said in certain communities all the time. I think that those kinds of statements are inflammatory. I think that they don't do the conversation around situations like this any good. But I do have to say that I have never seen someone respond and react to that phrase the way that this officer does. He draws his firearm. He says, "You better not. I'll shoot you in the fucking face." He draws his firearm. And then she says, "I'm sorry," and puts her hands up and kind of crouches down. Excuse me. And then for whatever reason, the officer, instead of backing up, he moves towards Sonya. And it seems as though she throws this pot of boiling water towards the officer, and he shoots her directly in the face like he said he was going to do. So the conversation has been, was this a situation that either A, could have been avoided? Was this a situation that rises to the level of deadly use of force? Did the officer need to move forward as opposed to backing up? A lot of questions. And depending on which side of the fence you tend to fall on situations like this, most people are giving their opinion based on their view of law enforcement, based on their view of, I mean, let's be honest, based on their view of maybe the Black community. Because you have in this situation the reoccurring theme of a Black subject and a white officer. So without me giving my opinion on the issue of whether or not he was right or wrong, or whether or not she was right or wrong, I want to talk about this through the lens of how we need to see this as private security providers. There are so many people that are far smarter than I am that have already broken down this video 7 ways to Sunday. And to be quite honest and quite frank with you guys, I'm at a point, as a human being, I'm at a point where I don't know how many more of these types of videos I can watch, because to me, I see the issue. I have come on here and made multiple videos over the last 2 years where I've talked about the issue of law enforcement being trained and law enforcement taking the stance that every person that they come in contact with is a potential threat. Now, to a degree, if you're working in this line of work, if you're working in law enforcement, or if you're working in private security, you have to understand that what we do, it puts us in a position where, you know, we could be hurt, harmed, or killed at any given time. So in one reality, everybody that we do come in contact with is a potential threat. But there's a difference between going to your job every day with a mindset of service and a mindset of being in a hostile environment. We've talked about the difference between working in law enforcement and being in the military. We've talked about the difference between, you know, working in private security and working in the military, right? We're not in a situation where the people that are here in our communities, the people that are in our neighborhoods, the people that come to our grocery stores, our shopping malls, any of that, on either side of that equation, we're not dealing with enemy combatants. We're dealing with citizens, and we're dealing with people in our neighborhood, many of whom are suffering from mental illness, many of whom at times make horrible decisions. And as professionals, whether you're in private security or you're in law enforcement, you have to be discerning enough to sometimes make the best decision for the people that don't make the best decision for themselves. If we look at everybody that we come in contact with as a threat, and if we take the stance that it's an us versus them situation or mentality, and if you live by the phrase, at the end of the night, I have to go home, then that's going to change every dynamic of interaction that you have with people. And you'll hear that from law enforcement officers. Hey, look, at the end of the night, I got to go home. Hey, at the end of the night, I've got to get home to my family. Hey, at the end of the night, the most important thing is for me to go home. And as much as I hate to say this, because I, in this adjacent realm, could fall victim to what I'm about to say, that is not the most important thing about your job. When you're a police officer, your job is to serve and protect the citizens. You are serving and protecting the taxpayers who pay your bills. At the end of the day, the most important part of your job is to serve and protect the citizens of the area that you're working in. It's not that you go home at the end of the night. We want you to go home at the end of the night. I want to go home safely at the end of the night. But if I look through the lens of the most important thing being that I go home at the end of the night, then that colors every interaction that I have. I don't want to say in my favor, but in a skewed view of things. If you're dealing with someone who I can look at objectively in that video within the first 45 to 60 seconds of that video, tell that there's something that's mentally not right with this person. I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the most educated. I'm not the most trained. But if I can pick up on that, a law enforcement officer should definitely be able to pick up on that. And it's okay. These are the takeaways that I want any private security guard who was watching this video to understand. It is okay for us, and it's also okay for law enforcement officers to be in situations that maybe you're out of your depth. Now, I don't know the level of response that this department has, the amount of people that they have available to them. But if you're not able to deal with someone who's suffering from mental illness, if you're not able to handle that situation without treating them directly as a threat from the very beginning, then maybe you're out of the depth of your area of expertise. And this is where the difference in how law enforcement operates at some point in time is going to have to change. Because this inevitable situation of someone calls for law enforcement assistance, cops show up, something goes sideways, citizen is killed, lawsuit ensues, taxpayers pay out. That can't continue to happen. There has to be a different way. I've argued many, many times to the point that I've stopped. If you guys follow this channel, if you follow my platform, I have been adamant for 6 months to a year talking about the fallacy of how law enforcement officers are being trained to see everyone as a threat, and to have the idea that you have to engage that threat and eliminate that threat. Think about that again. Everyone's a threat. You have to quickly engage that threat, and you have to quickly eliminate that threat under the guise that at the end of the day, you have to go home at the end of the night. That puts everybody in this combative situation. It's not a situation where the vast majority of officers are looking at a situation like, hey, I'm here to serve. At the end of the day, guys, look, you've got the firearm, you've got the backing of the state behind you, you've got qualified immunity. If you have to go to the stick instead of the carrot, no one's going to fault you for that. No one's going to blame you for that. But that should be at the far end of your interaction with the people that are in your city, right? As private security guards, we don't have any other way to operate. There are many times throughout the day where I deal with mentally unstable people. Many times, including today, where people are throwing things at me, where people are pulling weapons out of areas or grabbing something that could be a weapon. There's not a time where, you know, in my personal experience, in my personal situation, I couldn't justify that I had an opportunity where I could have shot someone. And I don't say this from a position of saying that I'm better than someone, or that I'm more knowledgeable or more calm, because I'm not. I am not in any way putting myself on a law enforcement level. I can't even imagine what these guys deal with on a daily basis, what they have to go through, what their experiences are. And I don't want to ever sound like I'm discounting that. I don't want to ever feel like or make it seem like I'm not being respectful to what these guys deal with and what they see on a daily basis. My only issue with law enforcement is that if your training and your viewpoint is that you're always constantly under threat and every person that you come in contact with is potentially a threat, and your job is to neutralize that, no questions asked, because at the end of the day, you have to go home. These are the type of outcomes that we get. I think that there is a great lesson to be learned in the fact that when you're not given that opportunity and private security is not in that position to operate that way, we don't have situations like that. Do we have our own problems? Absolutely. Do we have private security guards that go off the rails and do stupid shit? Absolutely. But here's the other takeaway that I want to talk about. Allegedly, this officer has bounced around to 6 different departments. On top of that, allegedly, this officer has 2 DUIs. And I believe that the officer himself is maybe in his early 20s. 6 different departments, 2 DUIs. There's a problem there. There's a problem there. I know a great guy who works with me who applied for 2 law enforcement agencies. Would love to be a cop. He's a good guy. They wouldn't hire him because of some blemishes on his credit report. They wouldn't hire him because he has some blemishes on his credit report. I know another guy who apparently didn't get picked up because he has a few speeding tickets on his driving report. Now, somebody somewhere is lying. If the bar is so high that people with poor credit, people with, a history of poor driving, if they can't get on the police force, but I can look in Los Angeles County and see that undocumented immigrants can be on the police force. And apparently a person who's bounced around to 6 different departments with the DUI can be on the police force. Something's not adding up. A lot of this could be alleviated by stopping some of these things from getting out of hand, by not continuing to allow people that have clearly violated policy, people who have clearly violated protocol, bounce from one department to another department. The bar shouldn't be lowered for somebody who's already in law enforcement, as opposed to someone who's trying to get into law enforcement. The standard should be higher. So, important takeaways for private security guards. Number 1, it is perfectly okay to understand that in certain situations, you might be out of your depth. If you're dealing with someone who seems to be dealing with a mental health episode and you can't handle it, it's okay to call for help. A lot of private security guards are always looking for action. And sometimes that action is not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So if you can't handle something, if you can't deal with the person that's directly in front of you, if it's getting out of control, don't hesitate to call someone else. Okay? Number 2, everything cannot lead to a shooting. For us in private security, it's 700,000 times more important for us to not find ourselves in that situation. Now, I say this, and God forbid tomorrow, but my desire is for each one of you who watch this channel, who listen to me for whatever reason, think about every situation you could possibly find yourself in. and think, is there another opportunity for you to get out of that finality of a shooting? Can you back up? Can you put your ego aside? Can you move to cover? Can you move to concealment? Can you de-escalate? Now, listen, at the end of the day, any of us, myself included, like, you might have to do what you have to do. But God, I hope that you're never in a situation. I hope that I am never in a situation where I'm calling out to someone that I'm going to shoot them and then find myself in that situation. The officer that was involved is now in jail. He is awaiting, I believe, maybe trial in August, and I think that he is in there without bond. And there's no telling how this is going to go. The final takeaway that I would tell you guys is that politics matters. We're in the middle of this contentious election year. You've got everything from the Biden-Harris campaign on the left, making this a racial and gender-specific voting bloc. And I don't think that there is any coincidence that Biden and Harris both made statements about this case. That is going to put tremendous pressure on the state of Illinois. And remember, the DNC convention is actually going to be in Chicago. The potential for protest, the potential for people to make this a part of the conversation can lead to a completely different outcome based on the circumstances. So as much as I have people constantly tell me, I don't buy into that woke shit, I don't play politics, I don't see race, I don't see color, I don't do this, I don't do that. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because we're not the people who are going to be on that jury. We're not the prosecuting attorney. We don't have any control over the wheels of justice once all of this stuff starts moving. So in every interaction, in every situation that you find yourself in, think about the optics, not the optics as you see them. It doesn't matter how you see it or how I see it. Think about the optics of how everyone else sees it. Everyone else in your immediate area, the politics of your area, the potential climate of what's going on around you nationally, regionally. Think about that. This is the key to survival working in private security and working in law enforcement, to understand the optics. Because optics matter, and they matter more than you think, especially right now in the time and the time frame that we're in. Okay? I know that a lot of people are talking about this case. A lot of people are already breaking it down. I just wanted to come on, say my two cents, and just caution you guys to think before you act. Okay? It's very tragic. And yeah. All right. You guys be safe. Have a good night.